A juicy great salute to you and welcome to the miniaturesy wargamey installment of the 2020 AWSHUX preview videos. In a year where publishers can't get to you guys to demo their games, we're doing it for them. And we're doing it sponsored by Ludocherry, makers of fine vintage style tabletop inspired shirts that I rather like. But anyway, on with the games, and first we're going to be looking at World of Tanks, the miniatures game. And if you have played the X-Wing miniatures game, a lot about this is going to be quite familiar, but if you've not, don't worry. I'm going to walk you through this game as if you knew nothing, as if you were completely innocent to the pain and danger of the world. And look how much pain and danger we've got in this starter set for World of Tanks, based on the popular video game. We've got 4 tanks, charmingly named the British Cromwell, the American Sherman, the Russian T-34, and the Nazi PZ.KPFW.4ASUF.H, which I think really trips off the tongue. These miniatures are absolutely lovely, as you can see. But as to how you play, as to how you send these tanks roaring across your dining table to fight, well, I'm happy to say it is rather simple. So there's 4 different ways you can play in the base set, some of which is to do with getting objectives and claiming them from one another by parking your tanks there as if you were trying to steal a parking spot. There are game modes which are just about blowing one another up. But whichever way you play, you're going to deploy your tanks on the edge of the table using this little arrow marker. And this gets a lot of use in the World of Tanks miniatures games. So we're going to put that on the edge of the table to show you how I would deploy my Cromwell. And then here again, if I want to put my Sherman here, park them in the middle of all my tokens, which is not ideal. But you know what they say, war is hell. When you decide you're going to have a battle, what you do is you decide how many points that battle is going to be. This is the same as in lots of miniatures games, actually. And then every tank has a point cost, so the Sherman costs 37. And then also, you've got all of this equipment. This is just what comes in the starter set. There's loads of different cards and equipment and crew members that you can equip your tanks with, and all of these have a point value as well. So you could field, say, lots of little tanks, or you could have 1 or 2 big tanks that are just stuffed full of things like improved ventilation and toolboxes and high-octane gasoline and firefighting equipment and gun rammers and, oh, I've just seen there's a card in here that reads pudding and tea, unique to the British side, and you can discard it to get rid of some of the critical damage your tank will take. That's lovely. I like that. That's really cute. But incidentally, one of the ways this differs from X-Wing is that tanks, if you assign them equipment, like let's say I've got this Sherman and I chose to give it some heavy ammo and, I don't know, a camouflage net, you put those cards face down. That means your opponent can see how many points each of those cards is worth, so you know that's big and expensive and that shouldn't be something I need to worry about. But only when the tanks actually use this equipment do you go, ha! I'm using my, you know, pudding and tea or whatever. Because, I don't know if you know this about tanks, but you don't know what's inside them. They're a bit like advent calendars or relatives with potentially poisonous politics in that way. But that is something that isn't in X-Wing, and that's a lovely little surprise that's going to create gotcha moments, so I think that's very cool. But I've distracted you with my tea and pudding for too long. I'm going to teach you how to play. So once you've got some tanks on the board and you've deployed and you know what you're doing, on your turn, it's relatively simple. First off, you're going to do movement. Then all the tanks are going to shoot, and then you're going to do a little thing called a command phase. But all of this happens according to everyone's initiative. So every tank has an initiative value, with low numbers being bad, they're the sort of slow-acting tanks, and high numbers are better. So for movement, moving last is best, because if you can see what all the other tanks have moved, if they've crept into cover or into forests, then you move last, you're going to have the most advantageous position on the board. So movement happens among all the tanks from slowest to fastest. So among these tanks in the starter set, the big, heavy PZKPFW, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but that's the slowest, which means it has to move first. And movement is particularly simple. Again, we're going to take this arrow token. That's going to be placed in contact with the base of your tank anywhere you like, okay? And then you're going to, let's say I wanted to move it sort of towards this cover. I might place it there, and then all you do is you move the tank so that it is flush with the stick. So I could move the tank there, or I could move it there. So you'll do that once. But that is just one movement, and tanks can move multiple times. So in the case of the PZ, it has a mobility of 2. So I could do that again. I could be like, and move it again. And then I would put, because it's moved 2, a little 2 movement token next to it. And the reason I do that is because the more tanks move in a turn, the further they move, I should say, the harder it is to hit them, but also the harder it is for them to hit anything. Imagine being a gunner and bouncing around in a tank and you're trying to aim and it's a disaster. So that tank's moved twice, so it's not going to be very good at either shooting or being shot. That tank might stay still because look, it can see this tank right here. That's exciting. However, if you stay still in the World of Tanks miniatures game, it doesn't mean your tank is literally staying still. You might say, I want the miniature to remain there, but I want my tank to sort of juke left and right and drive forward and backward and kind of crazy Ivan it so that it's harder to, again, be hit or hit anyone. So that tank there, our T-34, has a mobility of 3, so we could just leave it there and put a 3 token next to it, at which point it's not going to play an enormous role in the battle, but, you know, it'll probably survive. So you would move all of the tanks in this way, and once they have all moved, so let's put some more movement tokens out, if we imagine we move these two, then we would shoot. And shooting is, unless you're a very special tank, you are going to just be able to shoot anything because, of course, tanks' turrets can rotate. We're going to go in initiative order again, but this time it's reverse initiative order because obviously shooting first is best because hopefully you can blow up a tank before it even gets to shoot. So the slow tanks that had to move first will shoot last. So our highest initiative value on the board is the nippy little British Cromwell, so that's going to shoot first. It could shoot this tank or this tank, and we know that because all we do is draw a sort of imaginary line from the middle of the turret to anywhere on the opposing tank, and we say, can we do that? Yes, we can. We're not being blocked by any of the houses or walls or forests or hills that you can deploy, or in fact must deploy before every match of World of Tanks. Now let's talk about cover. So that tank is not in cover, obviously, because I can see all of it. However, if I cannot draw a line of sight from my turret to 3 of the 4 corners, so let's imagine that the back half of this tank was hidden behind it. So I can draw a line of sight to 2 of the 4 corners, but not 3. That tank is in cover, which means it's going to roll more defense dice. So, once you've determined whether you have line of sight or whether something is in cover or not, then you are going to assemble your dice pools. And this is incredibly simple. The Cromwell has a firepower of 4, so it's going to roll 4 dice. Ta-da! Now, these are 6-sided dice with 3 possible results. There can be blanks, there can be hits, or there can be critical hits, which are exactly as exciting as they sound. So, in the case of this tank, we've got 2 hits and a crit. Now, remember that. Now we're going to assemble the defense dice of the other tank, which, in the T-34's case, it has a survivability of 1, because it's rubbish. However, it's not the end of the day for our rubbish little Russian tank, because the Cromwell moved once, so it's going to get an extra defense dice. The T-34 moved twice, so it's going to get 2 more defense dice. It's in cover, which means it gets 1 more defense dice, and we're very close to the cap of defense dice. No tank can roll more than 6 defense dice. So we're going to roll those dice, and we got a hit, a crit, and a crit, which is more than enough to cancel everything that was done. The way that defense dice cancel attacks is that every hit rolled by a defender cancels a dice of the attacker's choice. Every crit rolled by the defender cancels a dice of the defender's choice. But let's imagine that we roll all blanks let's just imagine that a hit and a crit got through. That's nice and easy. A hit simply does 1 damage to the tank in question. A crit, you're going to draw from this special critical damage deck to see what happens, and oh no, the turret's jammed! These cards have a damage rating, which is damage that they do, as well as a special penalty. So our T-34's turret is jammed, and it gains the assault gun rule, which means it can only shoot in a straight line. That's bad news for our T-34. So that is the basic overview of the World of Tanks miniatures games. You're driving things around, you're rolling dice, you're getting in trouble, you're claiming objectives, you're revealing all the secret cards you bought set up, and hopefully you're on your way to getting hooked on this game, and then you'll just want to buy more and more of these lovely miniature tanks. Very much a game for tank fans, to state the obvious, but there's all kinds of lovely detailing in this game, from all of the period-specific upgrade cards you can get to all of the lovely different sculpts for all of these 4 countries of tanks. If you like tanks, the World of Tanks miniatures game is quite literally a game you can buy that uses a very solid foundation that is beloved by, ask any X-Wing player. Games of this type are a tremendous amount of fun.